The soft ticking of my old alarm clock carried through the darkness like a quiet reminder that another day was about to begin. I could have replaced it with one of those silent digital ones, but I never did. There was something about the sound that calmed me at night and stirred me awake each morning. As usual, I opened my eyes 10 minutes before the alarm would ring, letting myself drift in that space between rest and duty. It was a small habit that had become a ritual, one of those ordinary things that once gave me comfort. Lately, though, even the familiar rhythm of the clock felt unsettled. My name is Olivia Bennett. I'm 40 years old, and for the past 15 years, I've lived in the quiet suburbs of Philadelphia. On paper, I suppose my life would look stable, maybe even enviable. I teach English at a local academy, the kind of place where young athletes shuffle in half awake and half willing to learn the literature I try to put in front of them. I've built a reputation as the teacher who can coax an essay out of a kid who'd rather spend every waking moment in the gym. It's not glamorous work, but it has always been mine. My husband, Eric Bennett, built his own life out of nothing more than determination and grease under his fingernails. He started with a single garage, just 2 bays and a handful of tools. Over the years, he expanded into a chain of repair shops scattered across Montgomery County. People around here respect him. They call him reliable, a man who never leaves a job unfinished. When we met, I admired that steadiness, the way he seemed so sure of who he was and where he was going. After a string of men who thrived on chaos, Eric felt like a safe harbor. That, more than anything else, is why I said yes when he asked me to marry him. We never had children. At first, it was a matter of timing. Then it became a matter of possibility. Eventually, it was something we stopped talking about altogether. I told myself it didn't matter, that not everyone needed to fill their house with toys and diapers to feel whole. And for a long time, I believed it. Our home was filled with quiet routines. His early mornings at the shop, my late nights grading essays, weekends spent tending to the garden out back or visiting friends. It wasn't a thrilling life, but it was solid. At least it used to be. In recent months, something has shifted. Eric still leaves the house at dawn and returns after dark, but when he walks through the door, it's as if he's left a part of himself elsewhere. His eyes skim past me. His smile doesn't reach the corners anymore, and his words feel rehearsed. Conversations that once flowed easily now stop after a few lines, as if he's afraid of saying too much. I've asked if everything is all right, and he brushes it off with that practiced half-smile, claiming he's just busy. But I know better. I feel it in the way silence stretches between us at the dinner table, in the way he slips out the door before I can ask where he's going, in the weight that settles on my chest each time I hear his keys in the lock. Something has changed in my marriage. I can't explain it, and he won't, but I can feel it in my bones. And it terrifies me. Saturday mornings were usually my time to catch up on the little chores I put off during the week. I'd always believed in what I called family maintenance, not full-scale cleaning marathons, just 30 minutes spent keeping order. That morning, I decided to tackle the closet in our bedroom. It was late spring, and the heavier sweaters needed to be folded away. I thought it would be simple, pack up the winter clothes, make room for lighter fabrics, and feel like I had done something useful. I pulled shirts from their hangers, sorted stacks of jeans, and worked my way through the crowded shelves. Then my hand brushed against something stiff-tucked inside the pocket of one of Eric's button-downs. At first, I assumed it was a receipt or maybe a business card. But when I pulled it out, my stomach dropped. It was a photograph. The picture showed Eric standing beside a woman. She was striking, with sharp eyes and an air of confidence that seemed to leap right off the paper. She didn't look like someone casually caught in a snapshot. She looked significant. And Eric, he wasn't looking at the camera. He was looking at her with the kind of expression you don't fake. I froze, holding the photo between my fingers as if it might burn me. My first thought was that it must have been old. But the shirt he was wearing, the navy one with faint gray stripes, I had bought that shirt for him just last year. This wasn't some relic from college. This was recent. I tried to push logic into my panic. Maybe it was a customer. Maybe someone asked for a quick picture, and he didn't mention it because it didn't matter. But deep down, I knew better. The way he looked at her, there was history in that gaze. And then, slowly, memory stirred. I had seen her before. Years ago, when Eric and I first married, he'd shown me some photos from his college days. In one of them, there she was, same sharp eyes, only younger. He'd mentioned her name in passing, Sarah Collins, an old girlfriend, someone he used to know. Now, here she was again, older, but unmistakably the same woman. And Eric had carried her photograph in his pocket. I sat down on the edge of the bed, the photo trembling slightly in my hand. Confusion tangled with fear. What did it mean? Why hadn't he said anything? And why did it feel like a betrayal just to be holding it? The doorbell rang, startling me. I tucked the photo under a stack of folded shirts and went to answer it. It was Megan Ross, my oldest friend, balancing a bag of pastries and a smile that could brighten the darkest morning. She had seen me through everything: college heartbreaks, my wedding, the endless discussions about whether Eric and I would have kids. "You look like you've seen a ghost," she said, stepping inside. I hesitated, then pulled the photo from my pocket and handed it to her. She studied it, then looked back at me with raised eyebrows. "Well," she said, her voice calm but firm, "you can't keep pretending nothing's wrong. You need to ask him, Olivia. You need to know the truth." Her words settled heavy in the room. For the first time, I realized this wasn't something I could just fold away with the winter clothes. That evening, after Megan left, I sat at the kitchen table with the photograph lying in front of me like a piece of evidence. I had rehearsed a dozen ways to bring it up, but when Eric finally came home, I didn't bother with rehearsals. I simply held it out to him. "What is this, Eric?" My voice sounded steadier than I felt. He looked at the photo, then back at me. For a moment, I thought I saw a flicker of recognition, maybe even guilt. But then his face hardened, and he gave a short laugh. "Oh, that? Just an old friend. Ran into her a while back. Someone from college." "Sarah Collins," I said, watching him closely. His eyes narrowed slightly, just for a second, before he forced his expression back to neutral. "Yes, Sarah. You know how it is, small world. We bumped into each other, caught up a little. Nothing to worry about." But there was something in his tone that didn't sit right with me. Too casual, too rehearsed. And when I pressed for details, when, where, why he hadn't mentioned it, he shrugged me off, saying it wasn't important, that I was reading too much into things. What unsettled me more than his words was his body language. He wouldn't meet my eyes. He busied himself with pouring a drink, fiddling with the mail, anything to avoid looking directly at me. For 15 years, I had learned his tells the way a teacher learns the margins of an essay. He was hiding something. That night, lying awake beside him, I stared at the ceiling and felt the weight of doubt pressing down. If it had truly been nothing, why not just say so plainly? Why tuck the photo into his pocket, like a secret? I told myself I couldn't go on guessing. I needed to see for myself. The following week, I left work early one afternoon, telling my students I wasn't feeling well. I parked a block away from Eric's main shop and waited. Sure enough, just after 5, I saw him lock up and get into his truck. My heart pounded as I started the engine and followed from a careful distance. He drove into the city, weaving through the traffic until he pulled up outside a small cafe I didn't recognize. I parked far enough away to remain unseen, but close enough to watch. My breath caught as I saw her, Sarah Collins, step out of a cab and walk toward the entrance. They sat across from each other at a corner table, near the window. I had braced myself for an embrace, for the kind of intimacy I feared most. But what I saw instead was different. Their gestures were sharp, their faces tense. Sarah leaned forward, her voice raised, while Eric shook his head and looked away. At one point, he put his hands up in frustration, as if to cut her off. It wasn't romance I was watching. It was conflict. From the outside, I couldn't hear the words, but I could feel the storm between them. And as I sat there gripping the steering wheel, one thought burned through my mind. This was no casual reunion. Something far more complicated was pulling my husband back into her orbit. That night, I set the table for two as usual, even though a part of me already knew I would be eating alone. By 9 o'clock, the food sat untouched, the candles I had lit burned low, and the silence in the house grew heavy enough to press against my ribs. Eric had always come home, no matter how late. He might show up covered in grease, exhausted, distracted, but he always walked through that door. By 10, I started calling. First his cell phone, then the shop, then the second shop in Conshohocken. Every call went to voicemail, every ring cut short. I left message after message, my voice rising with each one. Eric, it's me. Call me back. Please. By midnight, panic had settled in like a physical weight. I paced the kitchen, phone in hand, dialing again and again. At one point, I thought I heard the crunch of tires in the driveway, but when I pulled back the curtain, the street was empty, only the occasional sweep of headlights from passing cars. At 2 a.m, I drove to his main garage myself, convincing myself he might have fallen asleep there. The lot was dark, the doors locked, no truck in sight. I sat in my car in the empty parking lot, shaking, staring at the silent building as if answers might spill out of its walls. When I finally went to the police station, the officer at the desk listened politely but without urgency. "Ma'am, adults are allowed to go missing for a while if they want to," he said. "We can't file a missing persons report until 72 hours have passed." 72 hours. My voice cracked. "You don't understand. He's never done this before. Something's wrong." The officer gave me the kind of look reserved for anxious wives and overreacting citizens. He handed me a card with a number to call if I heard anything and sent me home. Driving back, the city lights blurred through the windshield. Every red light felt like an eternity. Every shadow on the sidewalk seemed suspicious. I tried to imagine explanations that made sense. Maybe his phone died. Maybe he needed space. Maybe he stayed with a friend. But none of those excuses fit Eric, not the man I had known for 15 years. By the time I pulled into our driveway, dawn was edging the horizon. I hadn't slept. My hands trembled as I turned off the ignition. I walked inside and sat on the couch, the silence louder than any sound I had ever heard. For the first time since we were married, Eric Bennett had not come home. And deep down, beneath the layers of fear and exhaustion, a single conviction had already taken root. This wasn't a misunderstanding. It wasn't a simple delay or a broken phone. Something had happened, something I didn't yet understand, and I knew with a certainty that terrified me. I was the only one who would fight to uncover it. By the second day of Eric's disappearance, I couldn't sit still any longer. The police still insisted it was too soon to treat it as anything more than a voluntary absence, but my instincts told me otherwise. I began retracing the pieces of the puzzle on my own. One name kept circling back in my mind: Sarah Collins. If anyone knew where Eric had gone, it would be her. Through a trail of small inquiries and a phone call Megan helped me place, I discovered the address of the apartment Sarah had been renting in the city. I drove there with my heart pounding, uncertain of what I would find. The building was older, the kind where the paint peeled from the walls and the stairwell smelled faintly of damp concrete. I climbed the steps, rehearsing what I might say if Sarah opened the door. But when the door creaked open, it wasn't Sarah who stood there. It was a young girl, maybe 10 years old, with dark hair falling across her face and eyes wide with caution. She looked at me as though she expected trouble. "Hi," I said softly, trying not to startle her. "I'm looking for Sarah. Is she here?" The girl shook her head, biting her lip. "She left," she whispered. My stomach tightened. "Left? When?" "2 nights ago," she said, "with a man. They went away and didn't come back." I crouched down so I was eye level with her. "What's your name?" "Marussia," she replied, her voice small but steady. I took a careful breath. Marussia, do you know the man's name? She nodded. Eric. He brought us to a big house. A vacation place. He said it belonged to his family. But then he and Mom left me there. I waited, but they didn't come back. The words hit me like a blow. Eric had been with Sarah, not just meeting her in cafes or sneaking a phone call. He had taken her to our family's vacation home. The one tucked away near the Poconos, the place we used for quiet weekends and holidays. And he had left her daughter behind like forgotten luggage. I stared at the girl, at her thin arms folded tightly across her chest, at the fear she tried to hide behind practiced calm. Whatever resentment I felt toward Sarah, none of it belonged to this child. She was innocent, abandoned, and terrified. Come with me, I said finally, my voice firmer than I felt. You can't stay here alone. She hesitated, glancing back into the dark apartment as though hoping her mother might suddenly reappear. But then she stepped forward, clutching the strap of her small backpack. Driving back to my house, she sat silently in the passenger seat, staring out the window with an expression far too old for her age. I gripped the wheel, my mind racing. My husband was missing, entangled with a woman from his past. And now her daughter sat beside me like some fragile reminder that none of this was simple. For the first time, the reality settled over me. I wasn't just searching for Eric anymore. I had also become the protector of a child I barely knew, a child he had already failed. In the days that followed, I tried to keep life steady for Marussia while my own world tilted further off balance. I packed her simple meals, made sure she had clean clothes, and let her curl up on the couch with her backpack, never far from reach. But every night, when the house grew quiet, my thoughts circled back to Eric and Sarah. The photo, the cafe, the disappearance, and now this abandoned child who carried their shadows. I needed answers. It was Megan who managed to track down someone from Sarah's past, a man named Gosha who had known her since their college years. When she pressed the number into my hand, she warned me to be careful. He might know things, but you don't know which version of the truth he'll give you, she said. Still, it was more than I had, and I couldn't ignore the chance. I met him at a diner on the edge of the city, the kind of place with cracked vinyl booths and a jukebox that hadn't worked in years. Gosha arrived late, tall and broad-shouldered, his hair peppered with gray. When he saw me, his eyes softened with recognition that wasn't meant for me. You must be Olivia, he said. I only agreed to this because of Sarah's girl. She doesn't deserve any of this. Over black coffee, he began to talk. At first, cautiously, as if weighing every word. Then, once he saw I wasn't leaving, the story spilled out. He told me Sarah had once been the center of attention at their university, a beauty that turned heads, with ambition burning behind her smile. She had met Martin Caldwell, a powerful producer who controlled more than music charts. He controlled people. Caldwell had promised her a glittering future, whisking her into a world of stages and lights. For a while, she seemed to have everything, but beneath the glamour was rot. Gosha said Caldwell was a man who needed dominance like oxygen. He kept Sarah under his thumb, monitoring where she went, who she spoke to, even what she wore. The charm turned to cruelty. There were bruises she tried to hide, nights she disappeared from friends. And when she tried to leave, he pulled strings to have her declared unstable. She spent months in a psychiatric clinic, powerless, until she finally escaped with nothing but her daughter in her arms. From then on, Sarah lived on the run, never staying in one place too long, always afraid Caldwell's reach would find her. Gosha leaned in, his voice low. You have to understand, Olivia, she's been through hell. But it changed her. She's not just running anymore. She talks about revenge, about taking back what he stole from her. Sometimes she scares me when she talks like that. I sat there, my coffee untouched, my stomach knotted. Part of me wanted to pity Sarah, to see her as a survivor clawing her way out of a nightmare. Another part of me recoiled at the thought of my husband entangled in this web of obsession and vengeance. When I left the diner, the evening air felt colder than it should have. I drove home with Marusia's quiet breathing filling the back seat, carrying with me not clarity, but a deeper tangle of questions. I had stepped into someone else's past, and now it threatened to consume my present. The story Gosha told me clung to my thoughts like a shadow I couldn't shake. If he was right, then Sarah was a woman broken by cruelty, running from a man who had nearly destroyed her. But the more I turned it over in my mind, the more I realized I couldn't accept one version without hearing the other. If I wanted the truth about my husband's disappearance, I had to face Martin Caldwell myself. Through one of Megan's contacts, I managed to arrange a brief meeting at Caldwell's office in New York. The building itself was intimidating, steel and glass rising high above the street, the kind of place that whispered power before you even stepped inside. His assistant ushered me through a reception area lined with gold records and photographs of celebrities smiling under bright lights. For a moment, I wondered what on earth I was doing there, a schoolteacher stepping into a world that didn't belong to me. Caldwell entered with the easy confidence of a man used to commanding attention. He was in his 60s, sharp suit, silver hair combed back, eyes calculating. When I introduced myself and mentioned Sarah, a flicker of recognition passed across his face, but it wasn't fear. It was disdain. "You've spoken to her friends, I assume," he said, pouring himself a drink without offering me one. "Then you've heard the tragic version of the story, the one where I'm a monster and she's a saint. Convenient, isn't it?" I forced myself to hold his gaze. "She says you controlled her, that you kept her locked away, that you ruined her life." He let out a short laugh. "Controlled? No, Olivia. I tried to save her. Sarah was ambitious, but she was unstable. She had a talent for attracting men and a talent for destroying them. She wanted the spotlight, but she couldn't handle the discipline. When she spiraled out of control, I did what anyone who cared would do. I got her help. She was placed in a clinic for her own safety. That child of hers? She uses her like a pawn to gain sympathy. Every man she meets, she lures in with the same story, how she's the victim, how she's been wronged. I've watched her ruin lives one by one." His words slid across the table like poison, and I couldn't stop myself from shivering. "And Eric?" I asked. He raised an eyebrow. "I don't know your husband, but if she has him tangled in her web, then you should be very worried. Sarah doesn't love. She consumes." I left his office shaken, my thoughts spinning. Gosha's voice rang in one ear, painting Sarah as a survivor, broken but fighting back. Caldwell's voice echoed in the other, branding her manipulative, dangerous, incapable of love. As I stepped out into the noise of the city, I felt caught between two truths that canceled each other out. Which version was real? Was Sarah the victim of a cruel man who used his power to destroy her, or was she the schemer who twisted every story to her advantage? For the first time, I realized the danger wasn't only in not knowing where Eric was. The real danger was in not knowing who or what he had chosen to believe. It was nearly a week after Eric vanished when I heard the sound of keys scraping against the front door. I froze in the kitchen, the glass of water trembling in my hand. Marusia, who had been drawing at the table, looked up with wide eyes. The door creaked open, and there he was, my husband, pale, exhausted, but unmistakably alive. For a heartbeat, I wanted to run to him, to collapse into the relief of knowing he had come back. But the anger and betrayal rose faster. I stayed rooted to the floor. "Olivia," he said softly, as if testing the weight of my name. "Where have you been?" My voice cracked sharp against the quiet. He set down his bag and rubbed his face with both hands. "It's complicated. I didn't mean to disappear. I thought I could handle it, but things got out of control." "Handle what?" I demanded. "Eric, I thought you were dead. I thought something terrible happened, and you just walked back in here." He sank into a chair, shoulders slumped. "It's Sarah. She pulled me back into her life. She's obsessed with making Caldwell pay for what he did. I tried to walk away, Olivia, but she wouldn't let me. She said she needed me, that I was the only one who could help her. My stomach twisted. So you left me here, night after night, while you ran off to play hero for her. His eyes lifted, weary and ashamed. It wasn't like that, I swear. At first, I just wanted to check on her, to make sure she was all right. But the more I listened, the more I remembered how it used to be with her. The way she looked at me, the way she made me feel needed. I felt sorry for her, and maybe I couldn't let go of what we had. The words cut deeper than any knife. So you risked everything we built, everything we are, for some ghost of the past? For pity? For nostalgia? I didn't plan this, he said quickly, desperation in his tone. I was trying to protect her, to keep her from doing something reckless. Caldwell isn't a man you cross lightly. If she goes after him, she'll destroy herself. I thought if I stayed close, I could stop her, but I lost control. I could feel my pulse pounding in my ears. Do you hear yourself, Eric? You chose her chaos over our life. You chose to vanish without a word and leave me drowning in fear. He reached for my hand, but I pulled away. I made a mistake, he whispered. I need you to understand, Olivia. I never stopped loving you. I just what? I snapped, tears burning my eyes. Loved her too. The silence that followed was louder than any confession. Eric stayed in that chair like a man waiting for a sentence he already knew was coming. His hands were clasped together, his eyes pleading, but there was no softness left in me to give. Olivia, please, he said, his voice low and ragged. I know I've hurt you. I know I made terrible choices, but I need you to forgive me. I need us to move past this. I came back because you're my wife, because what we have, it still matters. The words should have brought comfort, but instead they lit a fire in my chest. Forgive you. My voice rose higher than I intended, breaking against the walls of our quiet house. You left me here to rot in fear, Eric. You disappeared into the night without a word, and while I was calling the police, thinking you were dead, you were out chasing after another woman's demons. I didn't love her, he said quickly. Not the way I love you. It wasn't about that. Then what was it about? I snapped. You risked everything for her. You let yourself be drawn back into her chaos. And you left me, your wife, standing here with nothing but silence and questions. Don't you dare tell me it wasn't about love. It was about choice. And you chose her. He tried to reach for me again, but I stepped back, shaking, every nerve in my body frayed to breaking. Get out, I whispered. He froze. Olivia, get out. The words tore from me like a scream, raw and jagged. I can't look at you. I can't breathe with you here. You've poisoned everything we built. You've turned our life into a lie. So go. Leave. For a long moment, he didn't move. Then, slowly, as if the weight of my rage finally sank in, he rose from the chair. His shoulders slumped, his face hollow. Without another word, he picked up his bag and walked out the door. The silence that followed was unbearable. My knees gave out, and I collapsed onto the floor, sobs breaking free in a torrent I couldn't control. 15 years of marriage cracked open all at once, and the sound of my grief filled every corner of the house. I didn't realize Marussia had been standing in the doorway until I felt small arms wrap around my shoulders. I looked up through blurred eyes to see her face pressed close, her voice trembling as she whispered, "It's okay. You're not alone." Her kindness undid me even further. This child, abandoned by her own mother, left behind by the very people she should have been able to trust, was now comforting me. And in that moment, I understood the hollow ache at the center of my life more clearly than ever. It wasn't just Eric's betrayal that broke me. It was the reminder of what I had never had. No children of my own to hold. No small voice to soothe my pain. No arms to remind me that love could be pure and unconditional. As I clung to Marussia, my tears soaking into her hair. I realized the deepest wound wasn't losing Eric. It was facing the emptiness he had left me with, an emptiness I had carried long before he walked out the door. When the front door closed behind Eric, I half expected him to return within minutes. That had always been his way. Storm out after an argument, then circle back with an apology or an excuse. But this time the silence stretched. The minutes became hours, the hours bled into days, and still he didn't come back. I knew where he was. I could picture him in one of the garages, maybe staying in the small apartment above the shop he kept for long shifts. I imagined him convincing himself that I only needed time, that once my anger cooled, I would forgive him, like I always had with smaller betrayals. I could almost hear his thoughts. Olivia is steady, Olivia is safe, Olivia will come around. But he was wrong. Something inside me had broken, and broken things don't go back the same. At night, when I lay awake in the half-dark, I thought about the years we had spent together. The trips, the dinners, the quiet mornings with coffee and folded newspapers. I thought about the life we had built, brick by brick, with the kind of discipline that looks solid from the outside. And I realized that what I had called stability was sometimes nothing more than inertia. We hadn't been moving forward. We had just been standing still, afraid to admit that the foundation beneath us was already cracking. Eric had gambled with our marriage, not out of passion, not even out of love, but out of a weakness he couldn't admit. He had let nostalgia and pity pull him away from me. And in doing so, he revealed a truth I could no longer ignore. The man I had trusted with my life was capable of walking away without warning, of leaving me to carry the silence alone. There was no safety in that. There was no future in that. Marusia's quiet presence reminded me every day of what mattered more. She asked for so little, a meal, a gentle word, a place where she didn't have to be afraid of being left behind. In her, I saw a reflection of my own emptiness, but also a glimpse of something stronger. Caring for her showed me that love could still exist, even if it wasn't the kind I had once dreamed of. I didn't know what would happen to Eric. Maybe he would keep waiting, convincing himself that one day I would soften. Maybe Sarah would drag him further into her world, or maybe he would try to claw his way back into mine. But for the first time, none of that mattered. Because I had made my choice. I would not forgive him. I would not return to the illusion of stability that had kept me quiet for so long. I would not sacrifice myself to save a man who had proven he wasn't worthy of the sacrifice. The hardest revenge, I realized, isn't shouting or striking back. It isn't proving someone wrong or making them pay. The hardest revenge is walking away, closing the door, and refusing to let their betrayal define you. So I chose to walk forward alone but unbroken,